evil actually works. This will be an analysis of the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. In 1945, a Soviet army officer was arrested, not for desertion, not for treason, not for violence. He was arrested in a private letter, a letter to a friend. He made fun of Stalin's moustache. The officer was Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he spent 8 years in the Soviet labor camp system, the Gulags. But the thing you need to understand about this story is the people who put him there. Um, they weren't deranged, they weren't crazy, they weren't evil. They were just normal people, just like you. People who just wanted to keep their jobs, people who were afraid of the system, people who told themselves a story that what they were doing was necessary for everything to keep running. That's what this video is about. It's not about the gulags, not about Soviet history, it's about the mechanism. The quiet, simple, maybe boring way that evil actually operates. And why, if you're honest with yourself, you cannot be certain that you would have acted differently in that time. The story we need to be true. There's a version of history that makes us feel safe. It goes like this: evil is rare, it belongs to a specific kind of broken, corrupt, twisted person. The dictators, the sadists, the true believers. Think about Hitler, Stalin, the big names. A small, identifiable group. And you're not one of them. This version of history is very convenient, because if evil requires a fundamentally different kind of person, someone you can see, spot, has certain characteristics, then you're safe. You're not evil, you don't look like a crazy dictator. I read the Gulag Archipelago about a year ago, and I want to be honest with you. I went in thinking I understood what it was going to be: a book about Soviet atrocities, a historical document, a record of suffering. And it also was that, but what I wasn't prepared for was how relentless Solzhenitsyn turns the lens inward, not just outward at the system, not just at Stalin, but at human nature itself, at specific, repeatable ways that ordinary people became the instruments of evil of the system. He writes about this directly. He describes prisoners who became informers, snitches, inside the camps, who betrayed their fellow prisoners for slightly better food, for better blankets, warmth, just to survive, for the possibility of an earlier release. And he doesn't condemn them the way you'd expect. He says something far more disturbing. He understands them, because he understands how you get there. Not in one decision, not in a moment of cowardice, but through a long series of small adjustments, each one of which, taken alone, seems almost reasonable. That's the first thing to understand. Evil doesn't announce itself, it negotiates. One of the things the Gulag Archipelago does that almost no other historical account does is show you the machinery, not just the outcome, not just the bodies and the suffering, but the actual bureaucratic infrastructure of mass injustice. And what the machinery reveals is something deeply uncomfortable, something weird, which is that you don't need evil people to get an evil result. You need a system that fragments responsibility. So No single person ever feels like they're the one who's pulling the trigger and did something wrong. Think about how the rest worked. Someone files a report, maybe a neighbor, someone who doesn't like you, maybe a colleague who's a bit jealous. That person isn't sending anyone to a labor camp, you're just filing a report. Then an officer reviews it, decides it needs investigating. He's also just doing his job. He's not the one who's making the arrest. Someone else is making the arrest. His job is not to determine guilt, his job is to execute orders. He's just following procedures. A judge signs the paperwork. He has a quota. He has 40 cases today, so he signs 40. He just processes the files. Guards transport the prisoners. They don't know what he did. He looks like a regular guy, looks like everyone else. Put him on a train. Don't ask questions. Keep the guys moving. At no point in the chain does any individual person feel like they are the one who are monsters, that they are the one who are causing all this unnecessary suffering. But if you zoom out, the system specifically makes it that way, so no one ever feels like he is to blame. Hannah Arendt called something like that the banality of evil. Watching Adolf Einmach at his trial and finding not a monster but a bureaucrat, a man who organized the logistics of genocide, the way another man might organize a rail schedule. Solzhenitsyn is making the same observation, but from the inside of the machine. And what he found was this: ideology is the permission slip. The system gives you a story that makes you a small piece of the machinery. Feel not just acceptable, but necessary. You are not the one persecuting innocent people. You're protecting the revolution. You're serving history. You're doing what must be done. And that story is what allows a basically normal person to sign the paperwork. They make people feel needed, give them a sense of purpose, and make it all make sense to them. There is a psychological process that Solzhenitsyn documents, and it's one of the most quietly disturbing things in the entire book. He calls it soul's corruption, and it doesn't happen all at once. He describes the camp guards, not the sadist. They're not the interesting case. The interesting case is the ordinary Joe, the man who started with some remnant of consciousness and ended somewhere else entirely. It starts with small things. You look away where you're not supposed to. A guy gets shot out of nowhere. Just look away. It happens all the time. You enforce a rule more harshly than necessary because you're having a bad day. You accept a small benefit in exchange for not asking questions. None of these individual moments feel like a turning point. They feel like survival. They need pragmatism. They feel like just getting through the day. It's a slop, just keep the wheels turning, but each one moves you slightly further from where you started. It's a dead of 1,000 cuts, and the further you go, the easier it becomes, because you've already decided in 100 small ways that getting through is more important than whatever you used to believe about yourself. Solzhenitsyn writes about this with a kind of brutal compassion. He doesn't excuse it, but he explains it in a way that makes it feel relatable. He says the line separating good from evil doesn't run between classes, nations, or parties. It runs through every human's heart. And that line shifts, depending on the pressure you're under, depending on the story you've been given, depending on what everyone around you is doing. This is the part where most people check out, because to really sit with this requires admitting that you could have been a Nazi in the past. You could have accepted all those people being sent off to the gulags. Given the right conditions, the right pressure, the gradual escalation, you might not be the hero of the story. You might have been the person who looked away, who signed the paper, who adjusted. But here's where Solzhenitsyn does something that separates him from almost every other writer on the subject. He doesn't leave you in the darkness without a light. He shows you the alternatives. He talks about the people who did resist, not in grand gestures, big explosions, self-sacrifice, cinema, not with weapons of revolution, but just in small daily specific acts of refusal. The prisoner who refused to inform, even when informing would have made his life significantly easier. The officer who lost his post rather than sign a falsified report. The person who, in a moment where acquaintances was the obvious, safe, rational choice, chose not to acquiesce. And he's honest about what it cost. It cost them, not just abstractly, specifically, materially, in ways that made their lives genuinely harder. He doesn't romanticize it. Everyone paid the price, but they stepped up. And the question he's really asking underneath all this is, what is the internal structure made of? What is it that allows some people to hold the line when the system is pressing against them from all sides? I thought about this a lot after I finished the book, because the easy answer is character. It's some people have it and it's in you, some people don't. But according to Solzhenitsyn, that isn't right. He spent too long in the camps watching people he'd expect to be strong and see them break. Watching people he dismissed as weak and seeing something that he didn't think of would happen. They found the power inside him. So what he seemed to conclude, and this is a bit weird, is that it comes from having thought about it beforehand, from having already decided in advance what you will and won't do, from having internalized something deeper than just the comfortable sense that you're a good person. Because a comfortable sense of yourself as a good person is exactly what the system is designed to slowly dismantle. I want to be a bit careful here, because the obvious objection is we don't live in the Soviet Union. There is no gulag. This is ancient history, and you're right, the scale is different. I'm not drawing a direct equation here. Nothing is exactly the same. But here's what I think Solzhenitsyn is actually doing with this book. He's not just writing down history, he's writing a study of human psychology under pressure. And human psychology under pressure doesn't change based on the century or the country. It happened before, all places, not just Russia, not just Germany, everywhere on the earth. You're inside the system right now. You've been inside the system your entire life. Workplaces, institutions, school, political movements, and every system has its own version of pressure. Its own version of the story that makes going along with it feel reasonable. Its own version of the small adjustments that seemed harmless in isolation. The question Solzhenitsyn leaves you with is not about the Gulag, it's about what you've already decided, not what you do in extreme hypothetical, but right now, in the system you are living in. What are the things you've decided beforehand aren't acceptable? Not because they'd be dangerous, not because the world would die off and explode, but because you've looked at who you want to be and where you draw the line. And the terrifying possibility that this book opens up, the one I haven't been able to stop thinking about, is that most of us haven't actually drawn a line. We've just assumed we'd be good, that we'd be on the right side of the line. After Solzhenitsyn was released from the camps, he spent years writing his book in secret, under enormous risk, knowing that if he'd be discovered, he would go straight back to the gulags. But he wrote it anyway. I don't think he did it because he was a hero by nature. I think he did it because he'd been forced by 8 years inside the machine to understand exactly what he was made of. The camps broke him down. His comfortable identity, his social status, the assumption of his own decency, all of it broken down, gone. And what was left was something he then had to be responsible for. Most of us will never face that kind of pressure, and I think honestly that's part of the problem. Because without the pressure, we get to keep the comfortable story. We are the heroes. We would be good. We're always on the right side of history. The Gulag Archipelago doesn't let you keep that story. Not if you read it carefully. Not if you actually read between the lines, look at the words, and analyze them. There's a question in this book that I think is most important of all. The question is not how did it happen. It's not how do we make sure it doesn't happen again. The question is who would you have been? And more than that, who are you being right now?